Hey y'all, thanks so much for jumping in with us today. My hope for you is that this video will help deepen your faith in Jesus. Each one of these videos is a part of a larger conversation that we are having on the Christian walk. Now, if you have missed our past conversations, you can always catch those online at the Crosspoint College YouTube channel. Now, this month, we're talking about wasting it all on God. Now, wasting things is usually not a good idea, but there are times when not only is it a good idea, but we celebrate it and it inspires us. Like when a dad overextends himself to make a way for his kids, or when someone exhausts all of their resources to make a way for someone else. It's stories like Mary, who poured out her alabaster jar on the feet of Jesus, all she had to say, "I love you more than the possessions of the world because you're the Messiah." And one of the places that we can really waste it all as believers is prayer. It's always amazed me that in Luke 11, the disciples make a request of Jesus. They don't ask him how to do miracles. They don't ask him how to walk on water. They ask Jesus, "Will you teach us how to pray?" You see, the disciples had spent time with Jesus and recognized that this was the key to his ministry. Now, throughout history, there have been a numerous amount of men and women who have wasted their lives in prayer in the best way. When I think of people who wasted it all on prayer, I think of a man by the name of Howells. Now, before Rees became a great man of prayer, he was a coal miner in Wales. And when the Welsh revival broke out, Howells came alive in prayer. One of the sad realities of revival of the past is that the fire of passion and desire for God eventually begins to taper off and fades. The Welsh revival was no different, and over time, some of the flames of revival began to fade as men and women's hearts grew cold towards God. But Rees kept pursuing God with a great fervency. He had a deep passion to help those in need. While he had seen exuberant worship begin to fade, he knew and believed that there could be a rise in exuberance of service. Now, years after Rees had stepped into being a minister full-time, a war broke out. A war like the world had never seen before broke out. World War II was a horrific display of death and disregard for life as the Nazi forces began to spread across Europe, as hate spread for the Jewish people and pushed them out of their countries on the run for their lives. Rees was burdened to help them, recognizing that Christ himself, the God that he loved, was a Jew, and that the Jewish people were the people of God. Rees believed everyone who had been created in the image of God, and to threaten and act on the will to exterminate a people could only come from the mind of Satan himself. So Rees began buying properties to house the Jewish refugees on the run. Mansions and inns were often acquired in Wales to be a safe haven for the Jewish refugees. On multiple occasions, Rees would buy by faith, and he would purchase mansions without the finances to cover them, believing that God, who called him to provide a refuge, would also provide a way to pay for it. Now, Rees believed this, knowing that it was the heart of God to make a way for his people to survive. Every time, a benefactor would miraculously step up and pay for the whole mortgage and exactly what he needed. Now, people began to catch word of what Rees was accomplishing in God, and they began to support his efforts. It was during this time that Rees felt called by God to pray for the end of the war. He and the students of the college that he had started began to pray, praying from 7 p.m. to midnight. They never missed a day, and even prayed for an hour in the morning. And they did this for 6 years, asking God to move. Over and over again, God moved in their prayer meetings. And then what they prayed would happen. One day in particular held in its grasp the fate of World War II. It was the Battle of Dunkirk. It was in May 1940 as Hitler's tanks rolled across France and the Low Countries. that the Bible College began to pray that Hitler would be stopped. Reese Howells' journal reads this: "Today, on May 27th at 2:45 p.m., it is as much as I can do to believe today. The news between the two prayer meetings was awful. It was hell upon earth. You see, what had happened is a letter had arrived between the prayer meetings of the war advancing. Information didn't travel as fast then as it does now. Most information on the war was carried in letters. The prayer became focused for God to intervene at Dunkirk and to save the men. Now that night at 7 p.m., a peculiar thing happened in the next prayer meeting. And as the Spirit came upon them in prayer and supplication, one prayed at the end and expressed the assurance given to all by saying, 'I feel for sure that something has happened.' God had moved. And on May 24th, 1940, Hitler had given an order to halt the armed column driving towards trapped British and French troops. This order remains today substantially unexplained. And on May 28th and every day after, in the miracle of Dunkirk, hundreds of thousands of British and French soldiers were rescued. Did God intervene? Reese Howells and the Wales Bible College believed it was so, and so did many of the troops. As a matter of fact, in his review of the events of that day, Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding, Commander-in-Chief of the Battle of Britain, he made this comment: "Even during the battle, one realized from day to day how much external support was coming in. At the end of the battle, one had the sort of feeling that there had been some special divine intervention to alter some sequence of events which would otherwise have occurred." God moved. So much in our current circumstances, in our world, that we're faced with shortages and struggles and problems of this time, they can feel insurmountable. But maybe one of the things that we can learn from Mr. Howells is that God wants to bring about his purpose in our cities, our schools, our families, and the world, even more than we want. That prayer is the great difference maker, that God is waiting and that change is available, that prayer is the table that we can sit at to partner with God in bringing change. Reese Howells wasted it all on prayer. Let's take some time and reflect and talk around what it looks like to grow in prayer, to believe God for more as we walk out this Christian life.